Welcome to another edition of Oshkosh Area Politics. My name is Ben Schneider, once again joined by my co-host Paul Esslinger, former mayor of the city of Oshkosh and former council member. And today we're going to be discussing some school district issues. A lot going on with the school district, and we feel it's time to check in and find out what's going on with the school board. So Paul, school board's been busy, $3.5 million surplus, a lot of things going on. And so what's your assessment of what's going on?
Well, it makes me nervous to say that you are, and you're correct, that the school district has been busy. Unfortunately, I think with the makeup of the school board that we have, I get nervous when they discuss money issues because I've seen what they've done with money in the past. And I think tonight, as we're taping this, they're discussing a $111 million budget. And they're talking about borrowing $20 million for energy efficiencies and other things, and you've gone through that, so I've watched some of the school board meetings, and I, to be honest, have a difficult time watching them because I disagree with a lot of the things that they do and how they spend money. And we're going to get into a $3.5 million gold nugget that's been laid in their lap here recently. And but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm disappointed. As I stated factually in the past, and I'll state it again, 7 of the 7 school board members are endorsed by the teachers union, and this teachers union is the largest component of the $111 million projected budget. So, it's kind of like Colonel Sanders in charge of the chicken coop, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, forgive the analogy, short notice. That's the best I can come up with. But, we got 29 more minutes of the show. Maybe I come up with our better one, but. Yeah, the school district is looking at borrowing over $20 million for energy projects because they can. And to my knowledge, no one has come forward to speak out against it. And quite frankly, I think people don't speak out against it because it's not going to do any good. And the school board is kind of a shoot first, ask questions later. There is no long-range plan. I believe, and I'm going to predict today, and I'm going to actually state today, perhaps boldly, that I believe the school district is going to deliberately try to pump money into schools that they know in a few years should possibly be closed because there is a $20 million plus projected deficit the next 5 years. And that'll ensure that, we just put some money in that school a couple of years ago, so we can't close that school now, but we needed to build a new school and close another school that we didn't do. Within the last 2 years, the school district was talking about consolidating Southside schools and put an addition on it at Jacob Shapiro. However, a few of the school board members' children attend or are in the attendance area of Lakeside, and Lakeside was a school slated or discussed to be closed. So it was discussed through consultants at the board level, informally, kind of formally, that Lakeside would be closed and eventually addition would be put on it at Jacob Shapiro. Well, just a few, actually, as we speak, they're just finishing up a major roof renovation at Jacob Shapiro. So I believe that's going to negate any future addition because I believe part of the addition was to strip the first floor, build up, and build out. So I believe they're trying to deliberately make some permanence to their infrastructure so they can't close some schools because the school district wants to, or the school board members can only, they know how to be good borrowers and build new, but they don't know how to consolidate and be more efficient. As evidenced by the fact that no one on our current school board has voted to close a school, despite the last 10 years the enrollment has dropped by over 800 students. So basically our enrollment has dropped by over 3 elementary schools worth, but they can't shift gears and repurpose. Okay. So that's been a big disappointment. So again, they want to borrow up to $20 million if 4 members of the board say yes, and there's an absence of a long-range plan. So the fear is, in a few years, after they have to get into the meat of this major deficit, they're going to have to close schools, and we hope that they don't have to close a school that they just put a lot of money into.
Well, Ben, think about what you just said, and I agree with you. I think this is what's happening. But how can you, as a business, and the school district is a business, from the standpoint of school board members and the administration, how do you plan your business without knowing where you're going? How do you have a $111 million budget and just, what do you, fly by the seat of the pants and just say, we need to spend money on this today? And there's a, what, $100 million maintenance needs that we have. I mean, what is going on, and why do we constantly have these money issues with the school district?
Well, I think what's going on is there's a complete lack of the skill set necessary to solve problems. The long-range plan, I talked about that when I ran for school board 2 terms ago, 7 years ago. And someone may say, well, Ben, what did you do to get a long-range plan? Well, frankly, as a chairman of the Facilities and Finance Committee in 2005, I actually put that on the docket. We discussed it and we built it up, and then we ended up handing it off to our superintendent at the time, because they're full-time. That's what their full-time job. And then it hit the board level. Then the board talked about socioeconomics, and they talked about checking essentially W-2 incomes and make sure that the right kind of kids would go here to this school, and that's can't close this school, and it just became a free-for-all. So really, it's just a big disappointment. And what's really interesting is, prior to, and I've mentioned this numerous times, the school district just completed their fiscal year. Their fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th. So just a few weeks ago, they announced they had a $3.5 million surplus. And as we speak tonight, they're looking at adding a district administrator. To my knowledge, after they had a $3.5 million surplus announced, they are not restoring a single kids program that they cut during the previous 6 years. And I voted to cut them too, because we had to balance the budget. Basically, you had to cut kids programs to pay for the union benefits, which I didn't support doing that, but based on the meet ARB laws, state of Wisconsin mandated, you had to do that, because I wasn't going to raise taxes 10+%. So a $3.5 million surplus, not a single board member to my knowledge has offered to restore a single cut program that was cut in the last 6 years.
Well,
and those program cuts amount to over $12 million, including the teen pregnancy program, the VIP program. So board members, where are you as advocates for kids? Why aren't you looking at restoring cuts to kid programs, but yet you're going to vote to hire more district administrators? I mean, seriously? If I was on the Board of Education, I would not support hiring more district administrators and more bureaucracy. I would vote and author resolutions to restore program cuts, especially to those most vulnerable or at-risk students.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but district administrators make a large salary and benefit package, am I correct?
Well in excess of $100,000 a year on average with salary and benefits.
Okay, but I want to be clear.
In many cases, 7 weeks vacation too, but that's
7 weeks vacation, right? I want to be clear, and hopefully the viewers can be clear. So about a year, or maybe a little more than a year ago, your finance director, when you were on the board yet, was saying, we're raising red flags, and we're going to have a $1.5 million deficit in the budget. To today, well, not actually today, but a few weeks ago, we now have a $3.5 million surplus that popped on just popped right out of thin air. So that's a $5 million swing. The first question I have for you is, how can a finance director not see that coming? Know that Act 10 was, the ramifications, whether it was going to pass or not going to pass, and pass that along to the board. And how can a board who claims that they are for the children, they all say they're for the children, who have cut children's programs, you've mentioned some of them here this evening, they've cut those programs, now they have $3.5 million, wouldn't they be raising their hand saying, Mr. Administrator, what are those programs that we cut? Are they essential programs in your opinion? And what would it take to get those programs back running again? I mean, wouldn't that be prudent?
Yes, it would. If you were truly an advocate for kid and you put kids first and not unions first, like the board majority does, that's what you would do. You'd be an advocate for restoring cuts to those services. Really interesting component of this discussion, Paul, is $3.5 million surplus realized. That's an actual surplus realized, but yet the board is still going to move forward on raising class sizes in the middle school to save money. So, it's a lot like, I think it's a lot like getting a big raise at home. You come home on a Friday night, you bring home some steak dinners and tell your wife you're going to celebrate, and you tell your kids, by the way, we're going to, I'm not going to pay for you to go to the dentist tomorrow because I can't afford it.
Nice.
But yet I'm going to go on a Canadian fishing trip.
But they're going to have larger class sizes.
Right.
I thought that was the boogeyman. If we had larger class sizes, you know, it was
Well,
going to break loose and kids were going to get killed and not going to be educated and
True.
going to be running around crazy.
Quite frankly, in the absence of cutting kids' programs and raising class sizes, I will advocate for raising class sizes. If we can preserve those programs, but we just have fewer kids, we just have more kids in that classroom. But if you don't, if all you do is hoard the money and you're just going to keep all this money in fund balance, which is the taxpayers' money, and basically tax for this money, because let's face it, surplus is the taxpayers' money. So you receive the surplus, and yet you don't use that surplus to either reduce the taxes or provide a service. What are you doing? What are you elected to do? So,
well, one thing I think we could do with the surplus, just registered 2 kids at South Park Middle School the other day, and it's like $70 a piece for fees. And you can imagine how many kids you have in the district, the fees, and I mean, I can afford to pay that. I'm not saying I can't afford it, but where are the fees going? Don't we pay taxes into the district? You got $3.5 million. Why don't you kick that back to the taxpayers every once in a while, or do something? By the way, this kind of just popped in my head. It's disappointing you and I have to sit here and talk about this. At least you're a former school board member. I sent out a request to the 7 current board members to come in here and talk about these things, because you and I can sit here and suppose what their thoughts are, and that's dangerous to do that. And I got some scattering responses back. They're doing something, or they had something else going on. But one, I was truly disappointed, because I have a lot of respect for this individual, and one that I thought has made some decent decisions on the school board. And this individual would not come on the show unless we gave this person the questions. Now, that is insane. Now, if we were going to ask this individual, we would like to know what the dropout rate was from 2000 to today. Obviously, you don't ask that question without the person having the time to go and get that. So, these are elected officials. They go to debates. You don't know what all the questions are at the debates. Why don't they say at the debate, I'm not coming to your debate because you have not given me all the questions up front. So, that's disappointing that these elected officials, and we did this, I wanted to talk about city council issues, and Burke Tower got back to me. He was going to show up. We couldn't, unfortunately, tape that night because we had some computer issues that we couldn't tape. But so the mayor did get back to me, was willing to come. But other ones, some had some legitimate reasons. Ben, are you going to be like violent with someone if they come in here, or do we have some?
No, in fact, interestingly enough, obviously it's documented that I opposed the Oak Lawn referendum, and I had one of the leaders, arguably the catalyst behind the Oak Lawn referendum, sit in that chair, and I interviewed this individual, and to make the case. I was cordial, I was polite, and I like to ask, have anybody defy me and prove to me how I was otherwise. I saw the email exchange because this board member, and I'm not going to mention his or her name, because we will reach out to this individual again, or I hope we will, and ask this individual to be on. But we simply wanted to know, ask some questions. But the criteria was provide me the list of questions in advance. And we've had numerous guests on. We don't do that. My 9 years on the school board, I never once, as a condition of being on a program, the radio program, being interviewed by the Northwestern, or other public access shows, indicated that unless you provide me the questions in advance, that I will not be on your program. And it's kind of diva-like. I mean, it's seriously, you're going to ask for that. And I hope that this individual reconsider, because I feel that it's important to get the message out. I mean, we're using facts to, all the data we've talked about thus far have been facts. $3.5 million surplus, borrowing over $20 million, $111 million deficit, budget. These are facts. And so, there's a lot more to talk about, but at this point, this time I'd like to ask our viewers to stay tuned and listen to our commercial break.
there are groups with harmless sounding names like Americans for Prosperity who are running millions of dollars of ads against Democratic candidates.
Obama, he promised change. Instead, he brought us more government, more taxes, and more debt. Now he's desperate, on the attack.
And they don't have to say who exactly the Americans for Prosperity are.
Who is he afraid of? Americans for Prosperity? People like you?
You don't know if it's a foreign-controlled corporation. You don't know if it's a big oil company or a big bank.
While President Obama attacks grassroots advocates like AFP, his big special interest allies spent meetings helping his big government agenda. Obama's attacking Americans for Prosperity because our citizen activists are making a difference. So keep knocking on doors, making phone calls, and speaking out. November is coming.
Thanks for staying with us. As we were talking about prior to the break, we want to get some elected officials on this program, and I've been impressed. Several of the council members have made an effort, and we would have had the mayor on, and frankly, we're going to treat people with respect, but we're going to be talking about facts and logic. And I think perhaps some of the reason why individuals don't want to come on this program is because, just like in our previous program, so many individuals like to use emotion to make their arguments, and we actually bring it down to logic and facts.
Right.
So, I just find it somewhat disappointing because if you're an elected official, make yourself accessible, try to reach your audience, and make your case.
Exactly.
And to my knowledge, also some of these board members, I believe, they won't even talk to some other media outlets because these media outlets try to seek the facts. And
you mean they dare to ask questions of an elected official?
Yeah.
How dare they?
And not to, I certainly have had my issue with a local media outlet, print media. And my issue wasn't because they're trying to report the facts. It's because, in my opinion, they were opining and editorializing in the body of a front page story versus on a Sunday paper. If you want to take a shot at me in the Sunday paper, just use facts and logic. That's your business. I'm a big boy. But they were doing that and misrepresented quotes. And I know you and I were subject to a story when we tried to have a joint school board council meeting, and they just completely distorted it. And so that kind of was an issue. But I hope we can get some individuals on, and we invite them. And always we invite viewer feedback. If people have ideas for a program, we will seek it out and decide if we can do a program on it. So,
well, I think a lot of people that go on other venues, they get softball questions, and they can wiggle out of any question that's really kind of posed to them. And here we're gonna, if someone gives us some emotional response, we're gonna say, what does that mean? And like you said, anyone that comes on here, whether we're fully for them or fully against them, they're going to be treated with respect, and they're going to be asked questions. And I think the distinction, Ben, is if we had someone that was a first-time candidate for city council, a first-time candidate for school board, we're not going to hammer them on facts and figures, and we're not going to do the gotcha thing. But someone that's been there for 4, 5, 6 years, should have a pretty good understanding at least of the principles of what's going on. And it's probably going to be a little tougher for them. But people that have been there for a very short period of time, it's going to be a little bit different. But anyway, back to the school district and what's going on with the budget. I did have a question for you. I don't know if you were aware of this or not, and get your thoughts. By a 7-0 vote, the school board agreed to spend $70,000 to buy a house to demolish in order to, quote, make the flow of deliveries at Oak Lawn more efficient. Plus, there's a cost, obviously, to demolish and pave the area. Now,
yeah, that actually, that quote was actually from a blog of one of the school board members. So that wasn't our verbiage. That was directly from the writing of a sitting school board member. And so they want to spend $70,000 to take an existing property off the tax rolls to demolish it, which I presume it's going to cost another $15,000 to $20,000. So spending roughly $90,000 to make deliveries at the new Oak Lawn school more efficient.
And these are the folks that are in charge of $111 million of your tax dollars.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, what business in Oshkosh would spend $90,000 to buy a home to tear down to make deliveries more efficient? And keep in mind, most businesses are 12 months of the year. Oshkosh is the public schools is really a 9-month-a-year business unless you're at your own facility like one of our high schools.
You know, one thing regarding the Oak Lawn, I don't know if you are aware yet or not, or if you know the facts on this. When you build these new buildings, especially in today's age, you can do a lot of environmental upgrades to building. You have, you know, a standard as far as what the building's supposed to have from an inspection standpoint, and you can do all types of green projects, which can be extremely, extremely costly. Do you have any idea of how much money we're going to be spending on these energy efficiency models and what the payback is for any of these?
Well, as it pertains to Oak Lawn, I don't want to speak directly to that because I don't have factual data in front of me, and unlike many other people, I'm not going to just play with emotion. But I will say that the school district is looking at borrowing over $20 million for energy efficient projects for our schools. And it's interesting because I know that the payback will be tens and years out, dozens of years out on some of these projects. But do I think some of these facilities or schools should have windows be replaced because they're at the useful life? Yes. But if you're going to be replacing a perfectly good water heater and spend, for example, $10,000 on a water heater for one of our big schools, and you're going to save $300 a year on gas, that's foolish. And frankly, I wouldn't doubt if some of that exists because $20 million, there are many, many projects.
Well, I'd almost guarantee they exist. But the question I have for you is $20 million, is that for this year? Is it $20 million for the next 5 years? If you borrow $20 million, can you borrow more? How is that structured?
Well, I believe they can borrow up to $20 million, and I believe that they're going to just borrow a lot of money and flood and just go really aggressive in the next 12 months on these projects. But again, that is one of the reasons why we wanted to have a school board member on. So school board member that wanted to be on, or kind of would have been on if we gave questions, there's one of your questions we want to ask you. So I know we probably have to give you more questions to meet the condition, and I also promise if this board member chooses to be on, I'll perhaps bring a bottled water or something too.
Okay, so I mean, this is kind of, is this along the line of the philosophy, Ben, by spending more, you get more aid? We've heard that line before, and you know, all these green things. I don't know if this is from the Solyndra Fund. You know, it was $500 million that disappeared overnight. Is this? It's, and the thing I love to hear as a past elected official is, well, it's funds. It's grant funds.
Oh yeah.
Well, what does that mean? That means it came out of my back pocket or my right front, or it all came out of my pocket. And so when you hear these officials, elected officials, say, well, it was a grant. Well, that's great because it's my money. And so, you know, we had the Solyndra from President Obama. That remember, he was inside of the building and talked about how great this was, and $500 million evaporated. You know, is this the same type of thing on a smaller scale? Well,
it's certainly maybe a second cousin of that, but it's ridiculous. And just two major points I'd like to make. One is we have a $3.5 million surplus, and again, the fiscal year concluded, we have a $3.5 million surplus. Prior to Scott Walker even getting elected, even before the November 2010 election, the school district was projecting a $1.5 million deficit. $1.5 million deficit the school district was projecting. As a result of Act 10, which to my knowledge every board member opposed, every board member has either not spoken in favor of it, signed the recall petition for Scott Walker, or their spouse signed the recall petition. I know that for a fact for 6 of the 7 board members. 1 board member has not spoke publicly for or against Act 10, so I presume they all are in that anti-Scott Walker bandwagon.
Have the blinders on.
So after Act 10, not a single cut to kids' programs, the school district realized a $3.5 million surplus. So and the school district opposed the method by which that surplus was created. So in other words, the school board prefers the previous approach that happened the previous many, many years where there's cuts to kids' programs. So in other words, they kind of cut kids, they oppose having the teachers and the employees pay more of their fair share. They oppose that, but they support cutting kids' programs. So,
well,
as evidenced by their vote to condemn Scott Walker. So now they have a $3.5 million surplus.
Are they thanking, wait a minute, are they thanking Scott Walker now because there's a $3.5 million surplus?
No, in fact,
really?
This is what I really want to make a fine point on. Now they have a $3.5 million surplus. They're doing their best to spend this surplus. They're using the surplus in part, they're going to hoard a lot of it, but they're actually hiring permanent positions and paying it for it out of surplus money. They've actually hired, to my knowledge, over 5 people that in part are being funded with surplus money. Keep in mind, folks, they already have a projected $20+ million deficit the next 5 years. So to me, they're laying the case for a referendum to exceed revenue caps because what they're doing is they're racking up the credit cards so they can go to their parents and say, I need to get bailed out. And they're hoping their parents aren't going to say, well, you just got back from Jamaica and 6 months prior to that you went to Costa Rica, etc. Plus you got a Mercedes-Benz in your driveway. Interestingly enough, the business director, Bob Tess, said, one-time expenses are the best use of fund balance. He was quoted in the July 26, 2012 Oshkosh Northwestern. Let me repeat that. One-time expenses are the best use of fund balance. So here our business director is saying one-time expenses are the best use of fund balance, but the school board, our business director, are basically raiding the fund balance to pay for ongoing permanent positions. That, to me, is very disappointing and very short-sighted. What they should do is they should develop a sustainable, viable, long-term plan so the kids don't have to suffer, and the kids and the parents don't have to keep paying registration fees, user fees, higher class sizes, etc.
Well, Ben, you know, we've seen this movie over and over and over and over, and the result, the ending is always the same. The plot changes and ebbs and flows here and there, but it's always, it seems like the kids and the taxpayers come out on the short end of the stick. And when is this going to change? We have 1 minute left, and we got to wrap this up, but when is that going to change?
Well, it changes when good people in December go down
fiscally responsible people.
Good, responsible, conscientious, hardworking people that understand finance. They decide to run for office, obtain a seat, and it starts from right there. This December, individuals can take out papers to run for school board. They can contact me. I will guide them through the process. There are 2 open seats, Steve Eliason and Steve Dito, and they can run for school board, and that's how it changes. Just like you're running for the 54th, just like Mike Schra's running for the 53rd, that's how it changes. So Paul, thanks for joining us. I'd like to thank our viewers once again for spending this last half hour with us. We ask you to like us on Facebook. Go to Oshkosh Area Politics on Facebook. If you'd like to contact us, you saw our email address on there. Give us some ideas and suggestions for future topics. So until then, till next time, we'd like to wish you a good night. God bless, and thank you again for tuning in.